It all began when my best friend emailed me on February 9th, 2011. He disappeared 3 days later, and I didn't know that would be the last I'd ever hear from him. My friend was emailing me to help him organize protests in Tripoli that would happen at the same time in Benghazi on February 17th. You may remember this. This was the uprisings, the beginning of the uprisings in Libya. In no time, violence spread, and then there was an intervention, and then it was war. We never really had the chance to mobilize. At first, I wasn't so sure I would get involved. The escalation was surreal, and I was shell-shocked. But when I heard that my friend was executed in detention, I decided to join the 17th February Coalition in the humanitarian sector. I helped set up a field hospital in Tripoli for when the rebels took over. But the waiting was long. It was 8 months of fear, of propaganda, getting used to curfews, getting accustomed to being disconnected from the world, long power cuts, dwindling resources. And then August finally came, and the rebel took over the city in 1 day. It was surprising. Tripoli was supposed to be the stronghold of the dictator. At the same day, I joined the field hospital as a field nurse, and then later the military hospital. When I worked there, in the couple of months I worked there, I saw the war not as I saw it in the headlines, but I saw the atrocities committed. And I was in an even darker place. For a couple of weeks, we received remains of mass graves of people executed during the 8 months, and some were even older. I helped families and friends identify their loved ones. I saw their heartbreak when they recognized the face, but I also saw their agony and despair when they couldn't see a feature in the decomposing bodies. Since February, I was on one side, the uprising against the dictatorship. At that point, I took an even stronger stance, and what I felt was the pure dehumanization of Gaddafi's forces. I reflected on it one night. I reflected on the rage and the grief that was consuming me, and I thought, that wasn't me. So the next morning, I went to the doctor who was in charge, and I asked him to assign me to work on Gaddafi's forces. No one went there voluntarily, only doctors helped. Their ward was always empty and guarded. But for some time, I dedicated myself to feeding them, cleaning them, helping them to the toilet, and giving them medications. I thought I was punishing myself. I wore a bracelet with the opposition flag. I never spoke to them, and I wanted them to see which side I was on. Until one very early morning, I was giving a round of antibiotics, and this young man looks at me, and in his eyes, the bewilderment and grief mirrored mine, and he said, "You make me feel inhuman." And the realization hit me very deeply that we were both Libyans, caught in this war that we did not decide or plan for, drawn on opposite sides, and at that point, we did not really understand why it happened the way it happened. So I sat next to him and held his hand, and we wept for a while. We didn't speak, I didn't see him again, but he allowed me to see his humanity. It wasn't so long after that I started to see the atrocities the side I was on was committing. I was disillusioned and left my post. But I was restless. I needed to do something. I needed to contribute to my country. As a young woman, there was no space for me in a formal structure. So I thought I would join civil society because I realized Libyan civil society was the only space at that time where people from different backgrounds on different sides were willing to talk to each other. People who have opposing opinions are willing to sit together and work to find a solution for Libya. So I worked at a psychosocial center for traumatized children and youth that helped children both cope with their trauma, but also gave the youth a space to mobilize, volunteer, help rebuild the country. I was part of many initiatives, from workshops of youth empowerment, preparation to election, to women's rights issues. Civil society work is not easy. It's exhausting and time-consuming. Activists are often working too hard and stretched too thin. But for a brief period of a little over a year, we had the freedom to work and protest every week. But then, in 2014, the war broke out again. Many activists, friends, and colleagues were assassinated, and we thought that we lost hope altogether in Libya. That was the last year I protested in Tripoli. When you hear about the word war, when you see it on the news, when you read about it in books and watch it in movies, you know about the blood, the rubble, the destruction, the loss. That is true, but it's part of it. You don't know about the people who continue to live through war. You don't know about the students who graduate in front of their bombed campus, the instability that hangs on your head like a sword, how it is to live not knowing what would happen to you and your loved ones. They don't tell you about the broken trust in the community, but they also don't tell you about the teachers who raise new generations, the women who start up businesses to help their communities. They don't tell you about the people who get up in the morning hearing the shelling and the bombing, and they would still go to their work and classes. In the midst of images of rubble and despair, they don't tell you about all those amazing people who take the active, conscious choice to resist the war by building lives. Knowing, meeting, and hearing about these resilient people, I could not give up on peace and civil society on Libya. And they are on all sides. They are in the government, in associations, in organizations, and yes, even in armed groups. Every single person in Libya have either witnessed or experienced the horrors of war. Yet we all try to keep the hope and the beauty of everyday life. I decided to pursue my master's degree in peace and conflict. I wanted to make myself the most useful tool for peace work. And what years of activism and war taught me is that we won't succeed unless we coordinate our efforts, and that we are well prepared for peace. I know it is difficult to sit and talk with someone you've put on the other side, or someone you thought of as the enemy, but they are part of the solution. And if we want to end the war, we need to engage with everyone. It is not enough to have foundations, organizations, parties. We need to work together. We need to coordinate, and we need to be more effective and efficient about it. That's why I've been working to raise capacities of civil society organizations and peace networks in Libya, to transfer knowledge and skills and prepare them and help them prepare for their peace work. We've spent years fighting, resisting, and tearing things down. Now, we have to build the society we want together.